Embracing automation enables state and local governments to modernize business processes, freeing up government workers from manual work so they can focus on meeting citizens' needs. By integrating business process management, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotic process automation or hyperautomation solutions into modern business automation tools, agencies can unleash the full potential of business and IT processes. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and joining us to talk about that today is Donny Barstow, President and CEO with MCCi. Donny, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Wyatt. It's great to be here.
So let me begin by asking, can you share your perspective on the value of hyperautomation and what that adds for state and local governments when addressing the challenges they continue to face with their complicated business processes?
Absolutely. I think the desired outcome behind hyperautomation is to create a backbone of automation tools that work together to transform business processes while being able to deliver scalable outcomes. So it's a tool set of multiple technologies that come together to take automation to the next level. When thinking about the challenges in state and local government specifically, in some cases, let's just start at the most rudimentary level, there may be no automation. That is still the case in a lot of this local government state agencies out there. In some cases, there's been that first stage of automation, or what I would call siloed automation, where they may have gotten rid of the paper, they may have done some workflow automation, but they really aren't making extensible use of the newer technologies to connect the dots to take it that next step further, which is really what hyperautomation is all about. In thinking about automation versus hyperautomation, it's really hyperautomation extends the automation efforts by tackling things like front-end intelligent document processing, which could include artificial intelligence, machine learning. I'll talk more about that. And also interconnectivity, between different business processes, different systems, that's going to really help take it to the next level. And also, there's a lack of technology right now. The technology is there, but it's not in use to really look at the highly transactional items that are being done by workers, where they could be spending more of their time on the creative, more business critical items. So really it's about how can we reduce the transactional work and have people do more meaningful work. So those are the challenges. When I think about some of the different systems out there, there's legacy enterprise level applications. And right now in state and local government, there's a big focus on how do we automate around these legacy systems, or how do we replace them? In each state and each agency is at a different life cycle right now, and they may be choosing, how do we connect? This legacy system is large, and we just need to do a lot of automation around it. And hyperautomation is great for that. There's also looking at modernization efforts overall. And when folks are considering modernization efforts, it's also important to understand all the new technology available so that we're not just thinking about the days of the old and what else can we do when we put a brand new system in. Also would say there is a sprawl of specific mainline business applications. So, taking a step away from enterprise applications, but there's a sprawl that IT is dealing with where people have gone out, workers or business units, and there might be hundreds of different applications out there. So there's a need to potentially consolidate those with low-code platforms that have hyperautomation functionality in them, or connect them. It's either one. There's not always the perfect answer, but understanding the new technology and how it can benefit, whether it's a effort to go to an enterprise low-code platform or connect disparate mainline of business systems is key. And then I would just end that question. That's a long answer, I'm sorry, but there's also, what's the current stage of the market? And I would say state and local government is still in the educational and early adopter phase of hyperautomation technology. And so right now they're learning a lot about what's available. And there's always a time in a market where people will all understand, it becomes common knowledge, but hyperautomation is a new term. And it takes a little while for people to uncover what all is available out there. And I'm excited to be here today with you just to share some of that.
Well, speaking of educating that audience, what resources or capabilities can state and local IT leaders really leverage now to really discover and implement this type of technology and really where it's at in its arc of evolution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest item is the awareness that there are low-code platforms out there that have enterprise capabilities for business process automation. And I think it's important because if you look at local government, state agencies, there are a lot of systems out there, custom systems that are legacy systems. And if you went back 10 or 20 years ago, that was the way to do it. You know, you might get staff augmentation of developers and build a custom solution for each challenge that you faced. Now there truly are, you know, enterprise level low code platforms where low code developers, when I say low code developers, there's configuration tools, there's flow charts, there's tools available so that you don't have to be a true developer to do a lot of the work. And just awareness that those are out there, that they're proven, that there's enterprise level agencies using them. I think that's probably the biggest thing that the awareness that people should have. The other thing I would just say is that the new generation of workers are used to things being automated in their personal life with all the technology they have available. And there's also an issue in state and local government of attracting the new generation of workers. And I think the two tie together. You know, we have to reinvent because when new people come in, they're going to want the ability to impact change. And we're seeing a lot of low-code developers that aren't in IT necessarily. They might be in the business unit. And that's a good thing to embrace.
I think that's a great point, particularly as all agencies struggle to find the right talent pool and being able to attract them as well. Well, let me next ask, so what are your recommendations for IT leaders to, you know, take it from a, let's call it a standardized automation tool to the next step of, you know, integrating intelligent automation processes into their broader enterprise systems?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that I would say is that the question's framed a bit around what can IT leadership do, right? I think it's a great question, but I would also say that that we're seeing that there's another driving force, and typically the primary driver is a business unit leader that understands their business challenge. And I would say the ideal scenario is that there's a partnership between the business unit and IT. And all the agencies we deal with, you know, there's some people that are great, they're already there. And then there's some people where IT may be looked at as just an enabler, you know, to help. And then there's some where IT is looked at as just keep the lights on, right? And but I think what they can do is it's really the responsibility of both the business unit and IT to identify where the biggest efficiency gains can be had and work together as a team. And you know, while IT continues to transform into a partner for business process automation, and we see IT departments at state and local level adding to their business analyst pool, adding project managers, adding low-code developers, that we do see this being embraced. But we also see business units adding the same types of folks. You know, there are a tremendous number of people coming into the workforce and that are already there that are data-driven, that are not necessarily traditional IT folks. And so I would say the ability to embrace that idea and work across the line is really critical to get there.
And then lastly, Donny, what innovative ways have you seen agencies implement this type of automation technology?
That's a great question. I will, the best thing I could do is probably use a use case that the listeners, that everybody, a generic use case that everybody would understand. So let's consider a accounts payable process. So, you know, that process is that the bills got to get paid, bills come in from vendors. They've got to get data out of those bills, the invoices. It's probably got to go through some sort of an approval process. At the end of the day, the extracted, validated, approved data needs to end up in an enterprise ERP system, and the payment needs to be made. So, you know, that's just a quick overview of that process. Well, let's think about applying hyperautomation to that and as a use case. So think about an invoice that comes in, whether it's paper or a PDF. Most invoices are coming in electronic these days. We're not as much in the paper, but that still happens. But think about that, and in that form of media, there is no database. There's no structured data. So what you're dealing with is unstructured data. So in the very beginning, I mentioned intelligent document processing as one of the hyperautomation tools. Well, there's great technology out there now that can extract that data off of that image and off of that document, that has, some of it even has AI already built into it to know what kind of patterns to look for specifically for invoices. And it can automatically extract that data, create a database, of that invoice information. And it can actually, if there's an error, it can spit it out to a queue for an operator to look at. And this is where machine learning can come in. Say, for example, that vendor's invoice, it didn't read it right. Well, if a operator corrects that, the software can learn from that correction, and next time it gets it right. So it gets better. And that's when, AI and machine learning tied in together really creates that next level of automation. That's just the front end of the process. And then thinking about business process automation or intelligent business process automation. And again, remember, hyperautomation is a combined set of technologies bringing all this together to get to the next level. All that data can then flow into an enterprise business process management system that could push that validated invoice, the actual copy of the invoice, the data. It might even ask them to do other things, like maybe GL code this, or hey, it could have rules that if it's over this dollar amount, it goes to this person for approval, et cetera. So it can manage that whole approval process. And then the outcome is they need to get that approved, validated data over to a system to actually finish out the life cycle of that record. And whether that's direct connection to a backend database or using something like robotic process automation, another tool set in the hyperautomation ecosystem, you don't have to have that backend connection. It can take that data, just like a human would have to go key it into another system. It can do that, in terms of a software robot per se, in layman's terms. So that's just an example, of how you could actually, a generic use case, and then applying hyperautomation and the full stack there to how you could get that next level of automation. So hopefully that was helpful.
Absolutely. Well, Donny, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about embracing hyperautomation to modernize business processes at state and local government agencies, and obviously as a means to improving citizen services as well.
Thank you, Wyatt.